Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here to share with you how WCIRB utilize the claims data to research opioid use. So WCIRB, I may not explain it, it stands for Workers' Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau. I have been leading the data science efforts to extract insights from our large volumes of data. So let me give you an overview of the data set that we are working with. So we work with medical transaction data that reflects 92% of all insured employers in California. And as you know, that California is the 5th largest, sometimes 4th largest economy in the world. So that database really captures a lot of insights in the workforce in California. And our medical transaction data documents all the medical procedures received by all injured workers in California, including their diagnostic information, when and where the services were provided, who provided, and how much it costs. So it's really exciting to dive into such large volumes of data, but the data also gives us additional complexities when we want to answer certain research questions. So now I'm going to show you what insights we extract from our transactional medical data. So this graph looks very familiar. A lot of panelists already touched on it. In California, newer workers' compensation claims are less likely to receive opioids in California. So there are two curves. The blue one shows the share of claims receiving any drug prescriptions among all claims. The percentage declined from 53% in 2012 to 2018 to 39% in 2018. And the more significant decline appears among claims receiving opioid prescriptions among those receiving any drug prescriptions. In 2012, which appeared to be the peak, is 45%. And in 2018, I think it's 10%. Sorry, it didn't show up. So the dramatic, almost 80% decline in California that we observe. And this is likely to due to collective efforts, such as legislative and policy changes that intended to regulate opioid prescribing behavior, such as the drug formulary that put all opioids into non-exempt drug category. So all prescribers need to go through the prospective utilization review before they can write the prescription of opioids. Secondly, the Cures database, which is the PDMP in California, that tracks the prescriptions of controlled substances. Public awareness of the national opioid epidemic certainly contributes to the decline trend. Last but not least, anti-fraud efforts that started in 2013-14 and really had a huge impact in the system in 2017. Since 2017, over 400 medical providers were suspended from practicing in workers' comp in California because of their either excessive opioid prescriptions or in providing inappropriate, costly, low-value care to our injured workers. And the downward trend of opioid prescriptions contributed to a smaller proportion of medical payments to opioids. And this graph shows that in 2012, about 16% of all medical payments were to pharmaceuticals, and it came down to 4% in 2018. And this was driven by both the lower costs of drugs and reduced utilization of opioid prescriptions per claim. So this graph shows that over time, pay per transaction of pharmaceutical transactions declined by 28%, comparing 2018 to 2012. And utilization of opioid prescriptions per claim declined by 72%, which combined contribute to over 80% decline in the pharmaceutical cost per claim. When we look at opioid costs, the pattern is even more pronounced, and pay per claim declined by almost 90%, the last graph. And this graph shows the substantial financial impact of successive opioid prescriptions on the whole system. So in 2013, opioid costs per 100 claims were about 15,000, and in 2018, it fell to 1,700. So a very significant 90% reduction shows some good progress had been made to the system. Now, what I did not show you is that injury mix did not change over time. We verified in our data. So it only leaves us to the possibility that physicians are or have been using other types of medical services to substitute for high levels of opioid use. That led us to be interested in exploring what alternative medical treatments were provided for injured workers in California. And we're particularly interested in comparing the utilization of certain medical services on claims involving lower doses of opioids compared to the utilization of medical services on claims involving high-risk opioid use, which we published a study April this year. And let me define high-risk opioid use first. We define them as using at least 50 MME per day for 30 consecutive days. And for our study, we found that high-risk opioid use claims are significantly different from lower dose use claims, which is not a surprise. But the good news is from this slide, a lot of information, but let us focus on the first line, is that for claims that had injury in 2013, the first two columns, only 2.5% of them involve high-risk opioid use. And that number declined almost by half to 1.4% for claims that had injury in 2016. So that also speaks to the good progress made in the system. The rest of the table shows the baseline characteristics among these two groups of claims. And the main takeaway is high-risk opioid use claims are more likely to involve both acute and chronic pain, and numbers is the percentage of claims. So there are, so for example, in 2013, about 32% of claims had both acute and chronic pain. Here we identify acute and chronic pain based on the ICD codes rather than the more subjective way of a scale of 0 to 9. And they are also more likely to have a major surgery, almost twice more likely. And among those that had a major surgery, they are more likely to have a surgery on the spine and the spinal cord. Given that these two groups of claims are so different, only through matching can we identify factors that are predictive of high-risk opioid use, as well as the alternative treatments that were provided more on the lower dose use claims. So the next few slides I'm showing you are the results based on the matched claims. So we use statistical techniques to match claims involving lower doses of opioid use on these 4 characteristics. And this graph shows the long-term cost impact of high-risk opioid use. And the graph shows 4 metrics: incurred medical, paid medical, incurred indemnity, and paid indemnity. This is about 4 years after injury. So we can see that high-risk opioid use claims incurred 2 to 3 times higher medical costs, as well as indemnity costs. Maybe it makes sense for them to incur higher medical costs because they also need other treatments to offset the side effects of adverse effects of the opioids. But higher indemnity costs really speak to significantly more lost time among the claims involving high-risk opioid use. One potential reason for the higher indemnity costs is that they are more likely to remain open 4 years out. So in the first year after injury, about 87% of claims involving high-risk opioid use are still open, and as compared to 65% of the claims involving lower doses of claims. But when we look at the 4th year after injury, the likelihood of them being open is twice higher than claims involving lower doses of opioids. And I'm going to summarize the primary findings from our studies. So we analyzed the early indicators of high-risk opioid use that may help identify claims involving high-risk opioid use early on. And we found that they were more likely to get similar opioids from multiple dispensers, both from physicians and from pharmacies and non-pharmacies. They were also more likely to have overlapping opioid prescriptions, use of extended release and long-acting opioids, which CDC guidelines recommend physicians not prescribing or not initiating extended release opioids as the first treatment. Lastly, we also found that they were more likely to concurrently use opioids and benzodiazepines. We analyzed the potential alternative treatments and found that physical therapy, acupuncture, and chiropractic care were significantly more utilized among claims involving lower doses of opioid use. And in particular, physical therapy were used 83% to 100% more on lower dose claims. So it really speaks to physical therapy as a pretty effective alternative treatment for pain control. We also looked into non-opioid drug treatments when found, and you remember the graphs I show, all the pharmaceuticals utilization dropped significantly over time, but we observed that NSAIDs and non-narcotics were dropped less, which led us to believe they were substituted for opioids for pain control. And this is, if you are more interested in more findings, the study is published on our website, and I'm happy to chat more. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Zhang. And so this portion, I'd just like to go back through the speakers and then just ask what's